Well, good morning. Glad you're here with us. My name is Bill Winn. I'm the lead pastor here at Grace Communion Hanover, and we're at 7300 Hanover Green Drive in Old Town Mechanicsville, and we're happy to have you here in person. And if you're not with us in person, what are you waiting for? We're glad to have you if you're watching on Facebook Live, maybe now or sometime later in the week. But let's begin with a prayer. So, Father, we love you because you love us, and even the love that we reciprocate to you is just that. It doesn't have its origin in us. Um, everything has its origin in you, and so as we gather together to love one another and to learn what it means to love you, help us most importantly learn to receive your love. We are your beloved, so Lord, help us be love. In Jesus' name, amen. So our memory verse today, speaking of love, it comes from the love chapter. Anybody remember what the love chapter is? You know, some chapters have a theme, a very obvious theme. Yeah, so 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter, and incidentally, though it is one of our favorites to read at weddings, it's not a wedding chapter. Paul didn't write it so we'd have something nice to read at our weddings. When he says love is patient, love is kind, well, Paul knows what John knew. God is love. So he's not just telling you what love is like. No, Paul is telling you what God is like. And here's one of my favorites. So you can take those verses and replace love with God, right? You can say God is patient, God is kind, God is not envious, God is not boastful, God is not arrogant, and this is one of my favorites. God keeps no record of wrong. You know, sometimes we forget that one, and it causes a great amount of fear. But our memory verse today comes from this same theme. Paul's been talking about love, and then in verse 12 he says, for now, temporarily, he says, for now, we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. Let's read that together. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, but then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. So we'll just take that as homework. We won't try to memorize it together today. And I think you'll find, at least I hope, you'll find that to be a good segue into the message today. So what does your head look like? You ever look in a mirror? Of course you do. Yeah, I haven't said getting bald. Every time I get my hair cut, I ask Tony. Tony's my barber. You know, I'll sit and wait till he's available. Tony over here at Charlie's Barbershop, he's been cutting my hair for almost 18 years now. And every time Tony cuts my hair, I get a checkup. You know, what am I getting bald back there yet? What's going on back there? You know, and Tony, he'll say, "Oh, you're fine." He said, "You got a little cowlick, kind of goes in a circle." Circle getting a little bigger, but you know, we still just call it a cowlick. It's moving in a circle, right? So anyway, yeah, we look in the mirror, don't we? Most of us every day. You look in the mirror. I want you to think for just a moment about how extraordinary that is for anyone who was born before, say, the 1800s. To say, I look in a mirror every day. Well, most people only ever looked in a mirror whenever they happened to be somewhere where there was a mirror. Some hamlets and towns and villages would have a mirror posted where you could go and look and see yourself in the mirror. There were other methods, looking in a reflecting pool, a bucket of water, a pail of still water in the right setting, the right light. You can see your reflection a little bit. But imagine being by yourself and having, you ever have that eyelash that got away and it was playing Tarzan on the other eyelashes and lost its grip and swung into the eyeball? What would you do if you didn't have a mirror? Yeah, because you do that, right? You take the little tissue, you fold it into a corner, and whatever it is that's in there, and you're looking in the mirror, and you get that out, and now everything's fine. What if you didn't have a mirror? What if you had an injury on your face that needed attention, and you didn't have a mirror, and you were by yourself? Just access to a mirror is pretty outstanding. Many in history previous to us would be astonished at the things that we have and that we take for granted that we have easy access to. So Jesus in Matthew 22, that's where we'll be today, told a parable. He told a parable of a wedding banquet. And this is the parable that Jesus tells, where invitations were sent out. Some came, some didn't come. In one case, they killed the messenger, and it's a brutal parable that Jesus tells. And then they catch people sneaking into the wedding banquet without wearing the white wedding garment. They're not wearing their wedding garments, and it's an interesting parable. And he ends with this verse that is grossly misinterpreted a lot of times about weeping and gnashing of teeth and outer darkness and all of these things. Many are called, few are chosen. And then in verse 15, there's this interesting interaction between Jesus and the Pharisees. There's two groups of people present, apparently, as this conversation was happening. The Pharisees, who were more traditionalists, they believed that the Roman occupation of Jerusalem and all those areas was a punishment from God, that it was wrong, it was bad. If you're living under the control of a foreign government, by force, yeah, of course that's bad. Well, there were other Jews who called themselves Herodians, and they thought it was fine that Herod was sort of in charge of, well, not sort of, he was in charge of things. I remember a Russian comedian during the Cold War named Yakov Smirnoff. Anybody ever? Not his real name, obviously a stage name. And he said he loved it. When he came to America, he said, there's so much freedom. He said, you can walk right up to the president and say, I don't like Reagan. Of course, Ronald Reagan was president back then. He said, but, in all fairness, that's true in Russia. You could walk right up to our president and say, I don't like Reagan. But you sure wouldn't say, I don't like you. But so this was the issue of the day. This is why so many of the Jews were waiting for a Messiah to come as a military leader to overthrow Herod and the rule of the Roman Empire. So you got these two groups there. There's these Pharisees, and they are definitely anticipating a Messiah that will come and overthrow the Roman government. And then there's the Herodians, who I think, for the most part, you would find more Sadducees among the Herodians, and they were cool with the whole thing. Look, we got aqueducts now. We don't have to worry about foreign invaders. We got the Roman army protecting us. Sure, we're their subjects. We have to do what they say, and we have to give them all this money. But they felt like there was a way to make the best of a bad situation. So these Pharisees are standing there. They're in the crowd. They're listening to Jesus teaching, and they're whispering among themselves, and they figured out a way to trap him. Right? They want rid of Jesus because he's claiming to be the Messiah. but he didn't bring an army with him, right? Can't be the real Messiah because their belief, I mean, you got to give them some legitimate credit. They loved Israel. They loved their community. They loved their fellow Jews. And they wanted to make sure that no imposters showed up and distracted Israel away from the true coming Messiah. Because in their mind, the true coming Messiah would free them from Roman rule. So they plotted to entrap him. In verse 16, they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher. Now, why would they send Herodians? Well, if they get Jesus to say something against Herod in front of Pharisaical Jews, big deal. If they can get Jesus to say something in front of the Herodians, what are the Herodians going to do? They're going to run right back to the Romans and say, that guy was talking bad about Herod. And that will get Jesus in trouble, and the Pharisees can wash their hands and be done with the whole matter. Right? Jesus goes to jail, gets tried, he gets killed, and they're done with him. Well, you know, spoiler alert, how that story worked out. It does eventually happen. And how did it go for the Pharisees? Like once Jesus was crucified, that was the end of it. No one's ever heard of him since. Kind of backfired, didn't it? Right? So they bring these. There's Pharisees and they bring Herodians and they say, Teacher. All right. They addressed him as teacher. They're plotting against him and they address him as teacher. They're patronizing Jesus. And Jesus is no fool. He knows what's going on. He says, Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth and show deference to no one. For you do not regard people with partiality. Boy, you talk about disingenuous, patronizing language. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? Is it lawful to pay taxes? That sounds like a dumb question, right? Because the law requires you to pay taxes. Well, you have to understand they're not speaking of Roman law. They're speaking of Jewish law. They're speaking of the law in Israel. Is it lawful? I mean, now it may be the case that they have no choice, right? Even if it is unlawful, they're still going to pay their taxes or else, right? All taxes are collected by force. If you think it through, like your property taxes are taken from you at gunpoint. And you say, well, that's hyperbolic, but follow the logic. If one day you decide, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not paying these property taxes. Well, they're going to send a letter to your house, and you're going to read that letter and go, I'm not doing it. And throw that in the trash. And they're going to send other letters, and then you're going to get one that comes registered. And then you're probably going to get a subpoena. You may get one of those. And it may come down to wherever you live, whatever municipality is given the authority to collect those property taxes, they're gonna show up with some friends and say, you got to get out. In fact, you may need to get out and come with us. And those people that they bring with them are going to be law enforcement. And they're going to ask you. And if you say no then, well, they have other means to make you go by force, right? So the collection of these taxes, that's the issue that they're discussing with Jesus about taxes, they don't have a choice but to pay the taxes. Their question is whether or not it's cool with God. Is it lawful? Is it cool with God for us to pay these taxes? Jesus, aware of their malice, he says, why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin. Show me this denarius was the coin. Let me see one. Anybody got a denarius? Jesus says, who's got a denarius? And somebody hands him the coin. And he said to them, whose head is this? Whose head is this? And they answered, it's Herod's. It's the emperor's. It's Caesar's. And so Jesus said, therefore, render to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and render to God the things that are God's. Well, there's your tithing passage. This is about tithing, right? You got to pay taxes. I mean, it was used that way for hundreds of years, thousands of years or more. This passage was used to tell people that this was about tithing. This was about giving to the church. Now remember, a tax is collected by force. Giving is by definition without force. We don't give out of any sense of obligation. We give out of a sense of blessing and thankfulness and gratitude. I heard a conversation this morning about a person that got a financial blessing and is planning to give a blessing out of that blessing, right? And that's the way it works. We bless others with that those blessings that God has blessed us with. So it's not about giving. It's not about giving. We're going to read to the end, and then we're going to go back. When they heard these things, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. I don't know if you watch any Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you if you the more you watch, the more you understand what's going on, and the two men are wrestling, and it's a very specific kind of wrestling, and you know, you'll see this person gets a hold here, and it's a trap, and there's only a couple of ways out, and if the other person makes a mistake, it's over. The match is over. And so Jesus smells their trap, and he very deftly walks right out of it, and he walks out of it with this statement. He says, give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. So when he says, whose head is that? The word there translates image. Whose image is on the coin, right? Anybody have a translation that says whose image? Yeah? Whose image is on that coin? So when you look in the mirror, what do you see? You know, maybe a few more wrinkles than last year, a few more gray hairs. First few gray hairs I got, I'll be honest, I'm not at this point, you know, maybe 10 years ago, I would have been ashamed to tell you I pulled them out with a pair of tweezers. I mean, it was just a panic reaction, right? I looked in the mirror, there was gray hair, I didn't know what to do, so I just yanked them out like before anybody noticed. And I was just with some other pastors earlier in the week for a little get together up in the mountains, and one of them, who's taller than me, was giving me a hug, and he looked at the top of my head and he said, "Woo, Bill, you're finally getting a lot more gray." I'm like, well, you know, it's bound to happen. If it doesn't, you know, something would be amiss. You know, I'd probably need to see a doctor about that if I didn't get some gray hair at some point. What do you see when you look in the mirror? Do you see someone who's tired? Sometimes, right? Maybe it's the end of a long day, or maybe it's in the middle of a difficult season in your life. And you look in the mirror and you just think, that's the face of a tired woman. That's the face of a really tired man. Maybe you look in the mirror and you see someone who's happy, filled with joy, blessed. And I think if we're honest, we recognize, you know, life is a lot like the weather. You know, it comes in seasons, and there are seasons when we feel like we're not going to survive to the end of it, and then there are other seasons where you just feel like you're in the middle of immense blessing. Davina and I have felt that way recently, that we're just, I mean, we're very busy, don't get me wrong, there's a lot going on, but we just feel like we're in a season of incredible blessing with some of the things that are going on, opportunities. We have the opportunity to invite our Davina's mom, my mother-in-law, into our home and have her live with us, and a chance to share life with her and care for her and dote on her and make her feel special. And we have a lot of hopes for that, and looking forward to it. We're trying to get the house prepared to turn my office actually into a bedroom. What do you see when you look in the mirror? Do you see the image of God? When Jesus picks up the coin, he's drawing an analogy. You are the coin. Whose image is on that coin? They said, Caesar's. And he says, so because Caesar's image is on the coin, who does it belong to? It belongs to Caesar. Whose image is on you, Jesus says? God. So you belong to the Father, Son, and Spirit. You always have. You always will. The Father loves you and he likes you. You're his beloved child. So Jesus is not saying tithe or pay taxes. Jesus doesn't have an opinion about your taxes. I do. Talk to me later. But Jesus doesn't have an opinion about taxes. He does have an opinion about whether or not you will let the Father, Son, and Spirit love you. He does have an opinion about whether or not we will surrender ourselves to him. And I don't mean surrender like the jiu-jitsu match where one person wins and one person loses. I mean surrender like a husband surrenders to his bride on their wedding night. I give myself fully to you. This is what it means to surrender to Jesus. Jesus doesn't have an opinion about Caesar. He doesn't even have an opinion about Caesar's control and rule over Israel, because that wasn't his mission. His mission wasn't to come and alleviate Israel's physical struggles. Jesus' mission was to undo the fall and to show us the heart of the Father. And he tells us here, Papa put his image on you. So give yourself completely to God. In the prayer, we acknowledged that everything comes from God. Everything has its origin in God. So this self-giving that we are called to, the self-giving of surrendering ourselves to Jesus, doesn't have its origin in us either. The self-giving of ourselves to God has its origin in God, and is demonstrated in the self-giving act of Jesus on the cross of Calvary. When Jesus went to the cross, it wasn't by force. It wasn't by force. What did he tell Pilate? I can bring a whole army of angels in here right now if I wanted to. I mean, so powerful is Jesus, the creator and commander of the universe, that when he spoke the words, ego eimi, I am, 500 Roman soldiers fell over like dead men. It says a Roman cohort came with the Pharisees when they arrested Jesus. A cohort is at least 500 soldiers. There's a scene in the movie Big Jake where John Wayne is taking supposed ransom money to get his kid back from Boone, Richard Boone's character. And they surround John Wayne in this barn, and they got shotgun up here and shotgun up there, and John Wayne goes, "You must figure I'm a real dangerous man." Well, imagine Jesus. They sent 500. And when he said, "I am," they said, "We're looking for the Nazarene." Jesus said, "Who are you looking for?" They said, "The Nazarene." He says, "Ego a me." Same words he spoke to Moses from the bush. And they fell over like dead men. No, Jesus didn't go to the cross by force. He went to the cross, and we'll begin passing the elements. He went to the cross out of other-centered, self-giving love. That self-giving that we are called to has its origin there in the heart of the Father, Son, and Spirit. And speaking of giving, is it tomorrow? The 24th, Tuesday. Tuesday, you will be able to order a copy of Free to Give. This book on giving that was co-written by authors such as Malcolm Smith, Steve McVeigh, Francois Dutoit, who did the Mirror Bible Project, Paul Young, author of The Shack, Crossroads Eve, and 52 Lies We Believe About God, I think. Huh? I think Paul wrote one like that too. Oh, it was a different title. Anyway, get the book. I've read all but one chapter of it, and I promise you, it's definitely worth the price of admission. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for the other-centered, self-giving love that you demonstrated once for all in the body of Jesus and his blood. Oh, and speaking of giving one more time, if you would like to participate financially in how we go about this ministry, you can do so by visiting our website, gchanover.org. You can text a gift to 804-409-0445. And, of course, there are envelopes in the back. And we appreciate it, and we love you, and we will see you next Sunday. What time is it? Anybody know what time it is right now? 11:30? Nailed it.